I'm Abigail Matthews, 32, standing in the corner at my sister Hannah's engagement party, watching her flaunt her ring. Nobody here knows I'm the youngest judge appointed in our district in 50 years. To my family, I'm just an admin assistant, and Hannah never misses a chance to remind everyone. She just mocked my career in front of her fiancé Nathan, a prominent attorney. If only she knew we'd met before in my courtroom. The silence that followed my one-word response changed everything. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Drop a comment and subscribe if you've ever had a family member who constantly puts you down. The revelation that followed changed everything. Growing up with Hannah was like living in perpetual shadow. 5 years my senior, she was always the center of attention in our household. From an early age, I learned that in the Matthews family, Hannah's achievements were celebrated with fanfare while mine were acknowledged with polite nods. Hannah got the lead in the school play. My mother would announce to everyone who would listen. Hannah's been accepted to 3 colleges with scholarships. My father would beam with pride. Don't get me wrong, I love my parents, Robert and Elizabeth Matthews. They're good people who provided us with a comfortable upper-middle-class life in suburban Boston. But they never quite figured out how to celebrate both daughters equally. Hannah was loud and confident, demanding attention, while I was quieter, more reflective. In our household, the squeaky will definitely got the grease. I remember bringing home straight A's in middle school, excited to show my report card to my parents. That same day, Hannah had been selected for a regional debate team. Guess which achievement dominated dinner conversation that night? Abby's always been the easy one, my mother would tell her friends. Hannah needs more attention. As if requiring less attention somehow made my accomplishments less worthy of recognition. By high school, I had developed a thick skin and found validation in my own achievements rather than waiting for my parents' approval. I joined the mock trial team and discovered my passion for law. When I announced my intention to attend law school after college, my parents' response was lukewarm at best. Law school is expensive, honey, my father cautioned. And it's such a competitive field. No such concerns were raised when Hannah decided to pursue a master's degree in marketing. The pattern continued through our adult years. Hannah would share embellished stories of her professional successes, while I kept quiet about mine. It wasn't that I wasn't proud of my work, I was. But years of having my achievements minimized had taught me it was easier to fly under the radar. The administrative assistant misunderstanding happened 3 years ago. I had just passed the bar and was working as a clerk for Judge Thompson, gaining valuable experience before applying for a position with the district attorney's office. At a family Thanksgiving, when asked about my job, I mentioned I was assisting Judge Thompson. My Aunt Sandra immediately assumed I meant as an assistant, and before I could clarify, Hannah jumped in. That's right, Abby's answering phones and making coffee for some judge, she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But we all have to start somewhere, right? The dismissive comment stung, but something stopped me from correcting her. Perhaps it was exhaustion from years of having my accomplishments diminished, or maybe a petty part of me wanted to see how long it would take for anyone to actually ask about my career directly. So I said nothing, and the misunderstanding became accepted as fact. What my family didn't know was that I had excelled beyond anyone's expectations. After my clerkship, I spent 5 years as a prosecutor with a near-perfect conviction rate. My reputation for being fair but tough earned me respect throughout the legal community. When Judge Thompson retired, he personally recommended me as his replacement. At 30, I became the youngest judge appointed to the district court in 5 decades, a fact reported in legal journals, but never mentioned at family gatherings. For 2 years, I'd kept my position quiet, telling myself it didn't matter what my family thought. But deep down, the little girl who had craved her parents' approval still existed. Sometimes I imagined revealing the truth at a family dinner, picturing their shocked faces. But I never did. Until Hannah's engagement party changed everything. Hannah's engagement party was exactly as I'd expected, extravagant, meticulously planned, and designed to showcase her perfect life. My parents had transformed their colonial home into a Pinterest-worthy venue with twinkling lights, floral arrangements, and professional catering. A large banner reading, "Congratulations Hannah and Nathan," hung over the entrance to the backyard. I arrived early to help my mother with final preparations, partly out of obligation and partly because arriving with the crowd meant facing Hannah's grand entrance. "Oh, Abby, you're here," my mother said, barely glancing at me as she adjusted a flower arrangement. "Can you help set up the drink station?" Hannah wants everything perfect when Nathan's parents arrive. My father was busily hanging additional string lights in the oak trees. "Hannah thinks it'll look more magical when the sun sets," he explained, balancing precariously on a ladder. I nodded, setting up crystal glasses and arranging bottles of champagne. This was typical. Even at events celebrating her, Hannah managed to maintain control over every detail. As guests began to arrive, I retreated to a quiet corner near the garden, nursing a glass of champagne. Relatives I hadn't seen in months greeted me with the usual questions. "Still working as a secretary, Abby?" Uncle Frank asked, patting my shoulder. "Nothing wrong with honest work." "Admin assistant," I corrected automatically, the lie having become second nature. Aunt Patricia squeezed my arm sympathetically. "Don't worry, dear. Not everyone can have Hannah's drive. You'll find your path eventually." I was 32 with a career most people would envy, yet family gatherings always made me feel like an underachieving teenager. At precisely 6 o'clock, a sleek black BMW pulled into the driveway. Hannah had arrived with her fiancé. I'd never met Nathan Carter, but I knew of him. He was a well-respected defense attorney who had argued several cases in my courtroom, though we'd never been formally introduced. I'd always conducted my court with a full robe and my hair pulled back severely, so I doubted he would recognize me in a cocktail dress with my hair down. Hannah made her entrance like a queen holding court, stunning in an expensive designer dress, her diamond engagement ring catching the light as she waved her left hand dramatically with every gesture. Nathan walked beside her, tall and handsome in a tailored suit, smiling politely as Hannah introduced him around. He seemed pleasant, if somewhat reserved compared to my sister's exuberance. "Mom, Dad," Hannah exclaimed, embracing our parents. "Everything looks amazing, though I think those flowers should be moved to the center table." Without waiting for a response, she turned to the gathering crowd. "Everyone, this is my fiancé, Nathan Carter, youngest partner at Harding, Powell, and Williams." Nathan looked slightly embarrassed at this introduction. "It's wonderful to meet Hannah's family," he said warmly. "She talks about you all constantly." Hannah continued parading Nathan around, highlighting his credentials to everyone they met. "Nathan just won a massive case against Bradford Pharmaceuticals," she told our grandparents. "The partners are talking about naming him to the executive committee." I sipped my champagne, content to observe from the periphery. My cousin Jessica sidled up beside me, the only family member who knew the truth about my career. We'd been close since childhood, and she'd attended my swearing-in ceremony. "How's her honor this evening?" she whispered. I smiled gratefully, enjoying the show. How long before Hannah mentions Nathan's Harvard Law degree? She already did. 3 times. I counted. Jessica clinked her glass against mine. "You know, you could end this charade anytime. And steal Hannah's thunder at her engagement party?" "I'm not that cruel." "It's not about cruelty, Abby. It's about honesty. And self-respect." Before I could respond, Hannah spotted us and sailed over, Nathan in tow. "Jessica, have you met Nathan?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. "And of course you remember my little sister Abby." Nathan extended his hand to me with a genuine smile. "Hannah's told me about you. It's nice to finally meet." As we shook hands, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, a slight narrowing, a moment of uncertainty. Did he recognize me? My heart rate quickened, but his expression cleared, and the moment passed. Abby works as an admin for some law office downtown, Hannah added dismissively. Nathan probably knows more prestigious firms she could apply to, don't you, honey? I'm sure Abby is quite capable of managing her own career, Nathan replied, giving me an apologetic glance. Throughout the evening, Hannah continued making similar comments, each one a little needle designed to establish the hierarchy she needed to maintain. Every time she mentioned my admin job, I noticed Nathan's increasingly puzzled expression, as if trying to place me. The tension built steadily as dinner approached, and I wondered if I could make it through the evening without the past colliding with the present. Dinner was served at a long table set up on my parents' patio, twinkling lights overhead creating a warm glow against the evening sky. I was seated between my elderly grandmother and a distant cousin, while Hannah and Nathan occupied the places of honor at the center of the table beside our parents. The catered meal was exquisite. Hannah had made sure of that, and conversation flowed along with expensive wine. I was almost starting to relax when my father stood to make a toast. To Hannah and Nathan, he said, raising his glass. Hannah, you've always reached for the stars, and now you've found someone equally ambitious to share your life with. We couldn't be prouder. Hannah beamed, basking in the approval I'd rarely experienced. After several more toasts, including a surprisingly heartfelt one from Nathan to his beautiful and passionate fiancé, Hannah stood up, commanding the table's attention. Nathan has some exciting news he's too modest to share, she announced. Tell them, honey. Nathan looked uncomfortable but complied. It's not that big a deal, but I recently won a case against Bradford Pharmaceuticals. It was a team effort, really. He's being modest, Hannah interjected. It was a 7-figure settlement, and Nathan was lead counsel. The partners are already talking about fast-tracking him to senior partner. As impressed murmurs circulated the table, I recognized the case immediately. It had been assigned to another judge initially but transferred to my courtroom after Judge Brennan fell ill. I remembered Nathan's skillful arguments and professionalism. He'd earned that victory. Hannah, high on attention and perhaps too much champagne, continued, Nathan works with real judges and important clients every day. It's such meaningful work. Her eyes found mine across the table, and I recognized the gleam in them. Here it comes, I thought. Not everyone can handle high-pressure careers, though, she continued. Some people are better suited to supporting roles. Right, Abby? The table's attention shifted uncomfortably to me. Abby's been an admin assistant for how long now, sweetie? For years. Hannah asked with false sweetness. 3, I replied quietly. 3 years, Hannah repeated, as if this confirmed something disappointing. Nathan, did you know my sister works at a law office? Maybe you've crossed paths. Nathan looked at me with curiosity. Which firm are you with, Abby? Before I could answer, Hannah laughed. Oh, Abby doesn't work at a firm. She's at the county courthouse, answering phones or filing papers or something. What exactly do you do all day, Abby? The table had gone uncomfortably quiet. My mother looked down at her plate while my father became suddenly interested in refilling his wine glass. Administrative support, I said evenly, the familiar lie bitter on my tongue. Hannah smiled triumphantly. See? Some of us were meant for greatness, others for making coffee. But we need both types in this world, don't we? A few relatives chuckled awkwardly. Uncle Frank gave me a sympathetic glance. My grandmother patted my hand under the table. Hannah, Nathan said quietly, a note of warning in his voice. But Hannah was on a roll now, perhaps sensing Nathan's discomfort and misinterpreting it as embarrassment on her behalf. It's fine, Nathan. Abby doesn't mind. She's always been the quiet one, happy to blend into the background. We can't all be overachievers. She raised her glass. To knowing your place in the world. The toast hung awkwardly in the air, few joining in. I felt my cheeks burning, not from embarrassment about my supposed position, but from anger at Hannah's deliberate cruelty and my parents' silent complicity. Nathan was looking at me intently now, his brow furrowed in concentration. Matthews, he said slowly. Abigail Matthews. From the county courthouse. Hannah beamed, pleased he was joining her narrative. That's right, honey. Not everyone can argue important cases like you. Nathan shook his head slightly, still staring at me. No, that's not. Wait. His eyes widened suddenly. You're not administrative support. You're. The moment hung suspended in time as Nathan's memory finally connected the dots. Abby, he said carefully, what exactly is your position at the courthouse? Every eye at the table turned to me. Hannah's smile remained frozen on her face, though confusion clouded her eyes. My parents looked bewildered by the sudden shift in conversation. For 3 years, I'd maintained this charade, swallowing my pride and letting my sister's dismissive comments slide. In that moment, looking at Hannah's smug expression, something inside me broke free. I took a deep breath and met Nathan's gaze directly. Judge, I said. The single word fell into a pool of silence, creating ripples of confusion around the table. What? Hannah asked, her smile faltering but not disappearing entirely. Don't be ridiculous. Nathan's face had gone completely still, recognition dawning fully now. Judge Matthews, he said quietly. Northern District Court. My grandmother's hand tightened around mine beneath the table. That's impossible, Hannah said, looking between Nathan and me, her voice rising slightly. Abby's an administrative assistant. She's told us that for years. I never actually said that, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. 3 years ago, I mentioned I was assisting Judge Thompson. Everyone assumed that meant as an assistant. I just never corrected the misunderstanding. I've appeared in her courtroom at least 6 times, Nathan continued, still processing this revelation. Bradford Pharmaceuticals. That was your courtroom. My father set down his wine glass with a thud. You're a judge? An actual judge. My mother's face had gone pale. But that's not. You would have told us something like that. Around the table, relatives were exchanging shocked glances, whispering behind hands, reassessing every interaction they'd ever had with me. The youngest judge appointed to the district in 50 years, Nathan added, a note of respect in his voice. I remember when the announcement was made. I just never connected that Judge Matthews was Hannah's sister. Hannah's face had transformed completely, shock giving way to disbelief, then anger. This is absurd. You're making this up for attention. I'm not, I said quietly. She's not, Nathan confirmed. Hannah, your sister presided over the Bradford case. She's highly respected in the legal community. Why wouldn't you tell us? My mother asked, her voice small and hurt. I looked around the table at the faces of my family members, some confused, some impressed, some embarrassed. Would it have mattered? Hannah was always the star. My achievements never seemed to register. That's not true, my father protested weakly. Isn't it? I challenged. When I got into law school, you warned me about student loan debt. When I passed the bar, it was mentioned once at Sunday dinner and never again. I stopped sharing my successes because no one seemed interested. Aunt Patricia covered her mouth. Oh dear. All those times I asked if you'd found a better job yet. Uncle Frank looked mortified. I told the judge of the Northern District Court that there was no shame in honest work. Under different circumstances, their reactions might have been comical. Hannah abruptly stood, her chair scraping loudly against the stone patio. This is my engagement party, she hissed. And you're trying to steal the spotlight as usual. As usual? I repeated incredulously. When have I ever stolen your spotlight? You're lying, Hannah insisted, though doubt had crept into her voice. Nathan, tell them she's lying. Nathan stood slowly, placing a gentle hand on Hannah's arm. Hannah, she's not lying. Judge Matthews is well known in legal circles. I've argued motions in her courtroom numerous times. Hannah jerked away from his touch, looking betrayed. You knew? You knew and you didn't tell me. I didn't make the connection until just now, Nathan explained. Judge Matthews on the bench looks different. He gestured vaguely to my casual attire and loose hair. Black robe, hair back, I supplied. Different context. My mother had started crying quietly, my father patting her hand mechanically while staring at me as if seeing a stranger. Cousin Jessica, who had been watching the scene unfold with poorly concealed satisfaction, finally spoke up. I went to her swearing-in ceremony. It was in all the legal journals. Youngest judge appointed to the Northern District in 5 decades. It was a big deal. And none of you thought to mention this to us? My father asked, looking around accusingly. She asked me not to, Jessica replied simply. Hannah was still standing, her face flushed with emotion. This is just perfect. Even at my engagement party, you found a way to make it about you. Hannah, Nathan said quietly. That's not fair. Fair, she laughed bitterly. What's not fair is discovering my fiancé apparently knows my sister better than I do. What's not fair is having my special night ruined by some twisted revelation. With that, she threw her napkin on the table and stormed into the house. After an awkward moment, Nathan murmured an apology and followed her. The remaining guests sat in uncomfortable silence. My grandmother squeezed my hand again and whispered, I always knew you were destined for greatness, dear. My parents looked shell-shocked, my mother's makeup streaked with tears. Why wouldn't you tell us something so important? She asked again. Before I could answer, Uncle Frank cleared his throat. I think that's fairly obvious, Elizabeth. You and Robert never paid much attention to Abby's accomplishments. That's not true, my father protested, but his voice lacked conviction. The party effectively ended after that. Relatives made awkward excuses to leave, many stopping to congratulate me with a mixture of embarrassment and newfound respect. My parents remained at the table, looking dazed and uncertain. As the guests trickled away, Nathan returned to the patio alone. Hannah's upset, he said unnecessarily. She's asked me to take her home. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. For what it's worth, he added quietly, you're an excellent judge. Fair and thorough. The Bradford ruling was spot on. Thank you, I managed. He hesitated, then added, I'll talk to her when she calms down. This is a lot for her to process. After Nathan left, I found myself alone with my parents for the first time since the revelation. The 3 of us sat in silence as the catering staff discreetly cleaned up around us. I don't understand, my mother finally said. We've always been proud of you, Abby. Have you? I asked quietly. Because it never felt that way. We need time to process this, my father said, running a hand through his thinning hair. It's a lot to take in. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. I should go. Neither of them protested as I gathered my things and left, the weight of 3 years of deception and a lifetime of being overlooked heavy on my shoulders. As I drove home to my empty apartment, I wondered if I had finally broken free or simply created a deeper rift in my already fractured family. The morning after Hannah's engagement party, I woke to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most were from extended family members, ranging from apologetic to curious. 3 were from my parents, asking me to call them. None were from Hannah. I spent the day in a strange limbo, alternating between relief that my secret was finally out and anxiety about the consequences. Part of me wanted to call Hannah, but another part, the part that had endured years of her subtle put-downs, felt she needed to make the first move. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Nathan standing in my hallway, looking uncomfortable. Nathan, I said, surprised. Is Hannah with you? No, he replied. She doesn't know I'm here. May I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. My apartment was modestly furnished but comfortable, with law books neatly arranged on bookshelves and a few landscape paintings brightening the walls. Nice place, Nathan commented, glancing around. Thank you. Would you like some coffee? He nodded, and I busied myself in the kitchen, grateful for the momentary distraction. When I returned with 2 mugs, Nathan was examining my law school diploma hanging on the wall. Columbia, he noted. Impressive. Hannah went to NYU, I said automatically, then caught myself. The habit of deflecting praise by redirecting to Hannah was deeply ingrained. Nathan took the coffee with a grateful nod. About last night, he began. I wanted to apologize. You have nothing to apologize for. I feel like I do. I should have recognized you sooner. I shrugged. On the bench, I looked different. More severe. It's not just that, he said, sipping his coffee. Hannah had described you so differently that I never made the connection. She talked about her little sister who couldn't find her place, who needed protecting. Not exactly how I'd describe Judge Matthews. I laughed humorlessly. Hannah has always needed to see me as less successful than her. It's how she defines herself, in comparison to others. Nathan nodded slowly. I'm starting to realize that. He paused. She was up all night, you know, alternating between crying and raging about how you humiliated her. I never intended to humiliate her, I said quietly. I just couldn't take it anymore. I know, he said. For what it's worth, I think you showed remarkable restraint. Most people wouldn't have kept quiet about such an achievement for so long. We sat in silence for a moment before he continued. There's something else you should know. Hannah hasn't been entirely truthful about her own career. My eyebrows rose. What do you mean? She's not a marketing executive, at least not in the way she's described. She works in marketing, but she's a mid-level account manager, not a director. She hasn't led any major campaigns. The promotion she told everyone about at Christmas never happened. The revelation stunned me. Hannah had always seemed so confident about her accomplishments, so quick to share her successes. Why would she lie about that? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. I think she feels tremendous pressure to be exceptional, Nathan said carefully. She talks about your parents' expectations, about needing to be the successful daughter. Our parents put that pressure on her, not me, I said, feeling a twinge of sympathy for my sister despite everything. Did they? Nathan asked gently. Or did Hannah put that pressure on herself? From what I've observed, your parents seem equally proud of both of you, or they would be if they knew the truth. His observation gave me pause. Had I misread the family dynamic all these years? Or had Hannah and I both been trapped in roles we'd created for ourselves? What happens now? I asked. Nathan sighed. I'm not sure. I care about Hannah deeply, but last night revealed some concerning aspects of our relationship that I need to think about. You're not reconsidering the engagement? I asked, alarmed. I don't know, he admitted. I love her, but the person I saw last night, the way she spoke to you, her reaction to the truth, that's not the woman I want to build a life with. She was shocked and embarrassed. I defended her, surprising myself. People say things they don't mean in those situations. Perhaps he conceded. But it revealed a pattern I can't ignore. The competitiveness, the need to put others down to feel superior, those aren't qualities that disappear overnight. We talked for another hour about Hannah, about my career, about family dynamics. As he was leaving, Nathan turned at the door. For what it's worth, Judge Matthews, I think you're exceptional. Not because of your position or achievements, but because despite years of being overlooked, you've remained compassionate. Even now, you're defending the sister who never defended you. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment, his words echoing in my mind. The truth was, despite everything, I loved Hannah. She was my sister, and underneath her competitive nature and need for validation, I knew there was a vulnerable person who had perhaps suffered in ways I hadn't recognized. Later that afternoon, as I was reviewing case files for Monday's docket, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was Hannah. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Without makeup and designer clothes, she looked younger, more like the sister I'd grown up with. Can I come in? She asked, her voice hoarse. I stepped aside, closing the door behind her as she entered. Nathan came to see you, she said. Not a question. Yes. He told me he did. He also told me he thinks we should postpone the wedding. I winced. Hannah, I'm sorry. Are you? She asked, but without her usual bite. She sounded genuinely curious. Yes, I said firmly. I never wanted to hurt you or ruin your engagement. She moved to the window, looking out at the city below. Why didn't you tell us? About being a judge. The question I'd been asked repeatedly since last night, yet coming from Hannah, it carried different weight. Would it have mattered? I asked softly. She turned to face me, and I was surprised to see tears in her eyes. Of course it would have mattered. You're my sister. A sister you've spent years belittling and dismissing, I pointed out, keeping my tone gentle. I never, she began automatically, then stopped herself. I didn't see it that way. How did you see it? She sank onto my couch, suddenly looking exhausted. I don't know. I always felt like I had to be exceptional. Like anything less would be failing. Mom and Dad never put that pressure on us, I said, echoing Nathan's earlier observation. Didn't they? Hannah asked. Maybe not directly, but it was always there. The expectations, the subtle disappointment when we didn't measure up. I sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. I think we interpreted things very differently. Maybe, she conceded. Or maybe they treated us differently. You were always the smart one, the responsible one. I was the pretty one, the social one. I felt like if I didn't excel at something, I had no value. Her words surprised me. Hannah, insecure? It seemed impossible, yet the vulnerability in her voice was unmistakable. So you lied about your job? I said gently. Nathan told me. She flinched. He had no right. Probably not, I agreed. But I understand why you did it. Do you? She asked bitterly. Miss Perfect Judge who never needed validation? I needed validation, I corrected her. I just stopped expecting it from family after a while. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken hurts and misunderstandings. Finally, Hannah spoke again. I'm not sure who I am if I'm not the successful one, she admitted in a small voice. If I'm not exceptional. You don't have to be exceptional to be worthy, Hannah, I said. None of us do. She laughed humorlessly. Says the youngest judge in 50 years. That's what I do, not who I am. Hannah looked at me for a long moment. When did you get so wise? Probably around the same time you started pretending to be a marketing director, I replied, allowing a small smile. To my surprise, she laughed, a genuine laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. For a moment, we were just sisters again, without the competition and resentment that had defined our relationship for so long. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. With Nathan, with you, with everyone. Maybe start with honesty, I suggested. It's worked out okay for me so far. She nodded slowly, then stood to leave. At the door, she turned back. I am proud of you, Abby. I always have been. That's part of the problem. After she left, I sat alone again, wondering if this was the beginning of healing or simply a momentary truce in a lifetime of sibling rivalry. Either way, the truth was finally out, and there was no going back to the way things had been before. The week following Hannah's engagement party was a period of uncomfortable transition for the entire Matthews family. My parents called daily, alternating between apologies for not recognizing my achievements and hurt questions about why I'd kept such important information from them. Extended family members sent congratulatory messages years too late, many including awkward acknowledgments of how they'd misunderstood my career. Hannah and I maintained a cautious distance, communicating primarily through brief text messages. She was trying to salvage her relationship with Nathan, who remained troubled by the dynamics he'd witnessed at the engagement party. 10 days after the revelation, my mother called to invite me to Sunday dinner, a weekly tradition I'd been avoiding for months with work excuses. Everyone will be there, she said, a note of pleading in her voice. Hannah, Nathan, your father, and I. We need to talk as a family. I agreed reluctantly, knowing the conversation was necessary but dreading it nonetheless. Sunday arrived with a sense of foreboding. I dressed carefully in casual but professional attire, a subtle statement that this was who I truly was. As I drove to my parents' house, I rehearsed what I wanted to say, the boundaries I needed to establish. My father answered the door, embracing me awkwardly. "Abby," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Good to see you." The house smelled of my mother's pot roast, her standard Sunday dinner fare. In the living room, my mother was arranging flowers, while Hannah sat stiffly on the couch. Nathan stood by the fireplace, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Abby's here," my father announced unnecessarily. My mother rushed over, hugging me tightly. "We're so glad you came," she whispered. Hannah offered a tight smile but didn't rise. Nathan nodded respectfully. "Judge Matthews." "Nathan, please. We're not in court. It's just Abby." Dinner was a tense affair, conversation limited to safe topics like the weather and neighborhood news. Only after my mother's apple pie was served did my father clear his throat significantly. "I think it's time we cleared the air," he said, looking around the table. "As a family." My mother nodded in agreement. "We've all had time to process what happened at the engagement party. I think we need to talk honestly about why things reached that point." Hannah set down her fork with a sharp clink. "Fine. Let's talk about how Abby deliberately humiliated me at my own engagement party." "Hannah," Nathan warned quietly. "No, let's be honest," she continued. "You let everyone believe you were some struggling admin assistant for years, then dramatically revealed you're actually a judge at my engagement party. If that wasn't calculated to steal my spotlight, I don't know what is." "That's not what happened," I said evenly. "I never planned to reveal anything that night." "You pushed and pushed, mocking my supposed career until I couldn't take it anymore." "Girls," my mother interjected, "this isn't productive." "Actually, Elizabeth," my father said, surprising everyone by using my mother's first name at the dinner table, "I think they need to have this out." "We all do." Hannah glared at me across the table. "You've always been jealous of me." I laughed incredulously. "Jealous?" "Hannah, you're the one who spent years putting me down to make yourself feel better. Because you were always the smart one, the perfect one. Why can't you be more like Abby? Abby never gives us trouble. Abby always gets straight A's. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up in your shadow?" Her words stunned me into silence. My parents looked equally shocked. "We never said those things," my mother protested weakly. "Maybe not in those exact words," Hannah snapped, but the message was clear. Abby was the good daughter. I was the problem. "That's not true," my father insisted. "We've always been proud of both of you." "Really?" I asked, finding my voice. Because from where I was standing, Hannah was always the star. My achievements were afterthoughts compared to hers. "That's ridiculous," Hannah scoffed. "They threw a party when you got into Columbia. When I got into NYU, it was just 'that's nice, dear.' They threw a dinner, not a party," I corrected. "And only after Aunt Susan suggested it. When you got that marketing internship, Dad called everyone we knew." My parents looked back and forth between us, bewildered. "We thought we were being fair," my mother said softly. "Well, you weren't," Hannah and I said simultaneously, then stared at each other in surprise. Nathan, who had been silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. "It seems to me that you both felt overlooked, just in different ways." The simple observation cut through the tension, making us all pause. "Is that possible?" My father asked, looking genuinely confused. "That we somehow made both of you feel like the less favored child." Hannah and I exchanged glances. For the first time, I considered the possibility that my perception of our family dynamic might not be entirely accurate, or at least, might not be the only valid perspective. "I think," Nathan said carefully, "that families develop patterns that aren't always visible from within." From an outsider's perspective, it seems like Hannah and Abby both created narratives about their place in the family that may not reflect reality. "That's easy for you to say," Hannah retorted. "You didn't live it." "No," he agreed, "but I've watched you compare yourself to everyone around you since the day we met. Not just Abby, but friends, colleagues, strangers. Your self-worth seems tied to being better than others, and I've never understood why. Hannah's face flushed. That's not fair. Isn't it? He challenged gently. You lied about your job title, your responsibilities, even that promotion that never happened. Why, if not to seem more successful than you felt? My parents turned to Hannah in confusion. What promotion? My mother asked. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. The director position I told you about at Christmas. I didn't get it. I'm still just an account manager. My father reached for her hand. Hannah, why wouldn't you tell us that? Because I couldn't bear to disappoint you, she cried. Not when Abby was so perfect. But I thought you were the favorite, I said, genuinely confused. And I thought you were, she replied, equally perplexed. We stared at each other across the table, the realization dawning that perhaps we'd both been wrong, or both been right, in different ways. I think, my mother said hesitantly, that your father and I have made some serious mistakes in how we raised you. Not intentionally, but the impact is clear. My father nodded solemnly. We never meant to make either of you feel less valued. We love you both so much, and we're proud of you both. Judge or account manager, it doesn't matter. It does matter, Hannah insisted. Abby's achieved something extraordinary. I'm ordinary. There's nothing wrong with ordinary, Nathan said quietly. Most of life is ordinary. It's how we live it that matters. Hannah looked at him, vulnerability naked on her face. Can you be happy with ordinary? I fell in love with Hannah Carter, not her job title, he replied simply. The conversation continued for hours, painful truths emerging alongside genuine attempts at understanding. My parents acknowledged their role in creating an environment of comparison, however unintentional. Hannah admitted her insecurities and the lies they'd driven her to tell. I confessed how I'd used my secret success as a weapon of sorts, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it. None of us emerged blameless, but by the end of the evening, something had shifted. The carefully constructed narratives we'd all been living by had crumbled, making way for something potentially more authentic. As Nathan and Hannah prepared to leave, my sister pulled me aside. I'm sorry, she said simply. For a lot of things. Me too, I replied. I don't know how to be your sister without competing with you, she admitted. Maybe we can figure it out together, I suggested. She nodded, a tentative smile forming. I'd like that. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Decades of misunderstanding couldn't be undone in a single evening, but it was a beginning. As I drove home that night, I felt lighter than I had in years, the weight of secrecy and resentment finally lifting from my shoulders. 3 months after the fateful engagement party, much had changed in the Matthews family. Hannah and Nathan had postponed their wedding, opting instead for a longer engagement while Hannah worked with a therapist to address her insecurities and competitive tendencies. My parents had become almost comically overcautious in how they expressed pride in either daughter, careful to maintain a visible balance. As for me, I'd stepped fully into my identity, no longer hiding my position or achievements from anyone. My courtroom had even seen a few family visitors, my father sitting proudly in the back row during a routine hearing, my mother attending the conclusion of a high-profile case that made local news. The most significant change, however, was in my relationship with Hannah. We'd begun meeting for coffee every other Sunday, awkward conversations gradually giving way to more genuine connection. We weren't best friends. Too much history lay between us for that, but we were building something new, something healthier. Today was one such Sunday. I arrived at our usual cafe to find Hannah already seated, 2 steaming mugs on the table. Court roast for the court lady, she said, pushing my coffee toward me with a smile that held only a hint of its former edge. Thanks, I replied, settling into the chair across from her. How's work? A shadow crossed her face, then cleared. Actually, good. I told my boss I want to earn that director position legitimately. He's created a development plan with me. That's great, Hannah. Really? It's strange, she mused, how much energy I wasted pretending to be something I wasn't. I could have used that energy to actually become it. I nodded, understanding completely. How are the wedding plans coming? Slowly. Nathan wants something smaller than I originally planned. He says the marriage matters more than the wedding. He's probably right. Wise man, I commented. You chose well. Hannah smiled genuinely. I did, didn't I? Even if he did almost call off the engagement after meeting my family. We both laughed, the painful memory now softened enough to become almost humorous. Mom and Dad want us all to come to dinner next weekend, Hannah said. They're celebrating their anniversary. I'll be there, I promised. Oh, and Nathan mentioned he's appearing in your courtroom Tuesday. The Westlake case. Yes, I confirmed, pleased that she could mention it without tension. Though of course I can't discuss it. Of course not, Your Honor, she teased, with none of the former mockery. Later that week, I found myself hosting a dinner of my own, a small gathering for women in the legal profession, something I'd started organizing monthly as a way to mentor younger attorneys. Among them was a shy second-year associate named Zoe, clearly brilliant, but struggling to find her voice in a male-dominated firm. Judge Matthews, she said quietly as the other guests mingled, may I ask you something personal? Of course, I replied. How did you become so confident? So sure of yourself? I smiled, thinking of the journey of the past few months. I wasn't always. For years, I hid my achievements because I was afraid of how others would react. I let people underestimate me because it seemed easier than facing their jealousy or expectations. Her eyes widened. Really? But you're so accomplished. Accomplishments and confidence don't always go hand in hand, I explained. I had to learn that hiding my light didn't serve anyone. Not me, not the people who could benefit from my example, not even the people I was trying to protect by staying small. What changed? She asked. I realized that my worth wasn't determined by other people's perceptions. And that by denying my own success, I was actually reinforcing the idea that it was something to be ashamed of. Zoe nodded thoughtfully. I struggle with that. Speaking up in meetings, taking credit for my work. I always worry I'll come across as arrogant. There's a difference between confidence and arrogance, I told her. Confidence is knowing your value. Arrogance is needing others to acknowledge it. When you're secure in yourself, you don't need to compare or compete. A lesson I wished I'd learned years earlier, one that might have spared Hannah and me so much pain. The following Sunday, my parents' anniversary dinner brought the four of us together again. The tension that had characterized our family gatherings for years had diminished, replaced by a cautious warmth. We were learning to see each other as we truly were, not as the characters we'd assigned each other in our family drama. After dinner, as my father and Nathan discussed a recent Supreme Court decision, Hannah approached me with 2 glasses of wine. I wanted to tell you something, she said, handing me one. What's that? I saw your name in the Bar Association Journal. The article about the Kingston ruling. The Kingston case had been challenging, a complex corporate fraud that had required months of hearings and deliberation. My decision had indeed been featured in legal publications for its thoroughness and clarity. It was a difficult case, I acknowledged. The article called you one of the most promising judicial minds of your generation, Hannah continued. And I realized I wasn't surprised. Even when we were kids, you always saw things differently, more clearly than everyone else. Coming from Hannah, this simple acknowledgement meant more than all the professional accolades combined. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved. I'm proud of you, Abby, she said, the words no longer seeming to cost her anything. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say that. Better late than never, I replied, clinking my glass against hers. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past few months. The revelation at Hannah's engagement party had been painful, even traumatic, but it had also been necessary. Like lancing a wound, it had released years of festering resentment and misunderstanding, allowing genuine healing to begin. I'd learned that hiding your light serves no one, not yourself, not those who might be inspired by your example, not even those you're trying to protect by diminishing yourself. I discovered that family dynamics are complex and often based on misperceptions, with everyone carrying their own version of events. Most importantly, I'd realized that it's never too late to rewrite the narrative of your relationships to create something healthier and more authentic. The road ahead with Hannah wouldn't always be smooth. Old habits die hard, and we'd both formed identities around our perceived roles in the family. But we were trying, and that was more than we'd done for most of our adult lives. As for me, I no longer felt the need to hide my achievements or downplay my success. Judge Abigail Matthews was who I was, not my entire identity, but an important part of it that I denied for too long. I'd spent years allowing myself to be underestimated, believing it was easier than facing others' expectations or jealousy. In reality, I'd only been limiting myself and reinforcing harmful patterns. The truth, when finally revealed, had been painful but ultimately liberating. Have you ever hidden parts of yourself to make others comfortable? Have you diminished your own light to avoid outshining someone else? I learned the hard way that authentic relationships can only be built on truth, even when that truth is difficult. If my story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Leave a comment sharing your own experience with sibling rivalry or family misunderstandings. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. Thank you for listening, and remember, you never need to make yourself smaller for someone else's comfort.